All right, so as we start, I just thought I would open with an apology to you personally. If it wasn't for our competitive, being good at softball all those years ago, we wouldn't have, had a cordial friendship built. And then if I hadn't worked at Fidelity for a year, we chatted on a weekly basis. We wouldn't have become friends. And then you would never met Cody. And then episode 2, Dad was like, the episode was, I don't know if you listened to it. It's called Man Up, Go Get Her. And then the next week, Cody then talks to you. So I think it's our fault that Cody's now dating your daughter. I just want to
Is that what you're calling it? Dating? Is that official?
I guess, yeah. I thought she said she told you the other day.
whatever
Well, just like
label you
your
want to put on it.
perspective on it. Just to...
Whatever label you want to put on it, it's my fault. I want to apologize.
Thank you. Apologies.
Like, I was thinking through that. I was like, what a weird train of events that had to take place.
Mm. Well,
So I don't know you at all, Dennis. So I thought I would be really interested to hear your story.
okay.
Yeah,
Right now, you're
Sure.
I think so. Yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
We can,
Only get me up to speed. I don't.
Where would you like me to start from the beginning?
you were saved a little bit later in life. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was saved in college.
Okay.
So I grew up in the Catholic Church. My mom was Catholic and my dad was Lutheran, but didn't practice. And I was an altar boy, and I had a great relationship with one of the priests there. And, due to all the things that happened in the church, I feel like I have to qualify. There was nothing ever inappropriate.
Right.
He really was great at wanting me to just become a better Catholic. And so that's where my interest in religion started. And then as I became an early teenager, I was like, yeah, I can't. This is not for me. And so I left the church and I went to college out in Pennsylvania. I went for business and I played on the tennis team. And during my sophomore year, I had a falling out with the coach. And I said, I'm done. So I looked where to transfer. I was accepted to UNH. And then Tuesday night of finals, I was studying and this incredibly oppressive feeling came over me. And it was like, you need to stay. I've never felt anything like it before. And talked to a buddy of mine who was an RA right across the hall. I called my dad hoping for an answer and he goes, I'm sure you'll make a good decision. So one of the best parenting things, my dad ever did. And it was so powerful. I decided not to transfer. It was Tuesday of finals week and I was gone. I was leaving that place, but
Headed to UNH.
Headed to UNH. Yeah. And so, but then I said, nope, it was so powerful. I said, I'm going to stay. The next semester I got saved. And so, there was this Fellowship of Christian Athletes group on campus, and that's where I started digging into the Bible, and because I had a lot of people speaking into my life at that time.
Which college? Out of curiosity. I go to them.
Bloomsburg University in Pennsylvania. It's a small state school.
How did you end up going there?
One of the guys that I went to high school with went there to play tennis, and he said, hey, you got to come check it out. It's a lot like Hampshire, and he was into business, and he had a good experience, and the coach actually was a believer, so.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Is that, that all?
Oh my gosh, how God's hand, how he does those things.
And I drive occasionally for some of the UNH teams now. Not that you went there, but
It's a good place.
But was it falling out because he was a believer and you weren't really, or was it just?
I wasn't a believer, but what happened was what I remember the situation to be, and again, when you're young, sometimes you don't always have the most objective perspective, but what I remember was I used to get injured a lot, actually. Really hard on your body playing all year round. And I got injured and we were going to our biggest tournament. We were playing a bunch of Division I teams. And he said, if you make the top 6, I'll take you. But if you don't, you're going to have to stay behind. And I got number 6 and he didn't take me. So that's what I remember it to be. So I was like,
I'm sorry.
yeah, it was hard. So
You play pickleball at all?
I play once in a while.
I
Not
hear it's
here.
much better for the older people. It's better for the olds.
Oof. Ouch. That cuts deep. True, but it cuts deep.
Less injuries.
Yeah. Like maybe if Heidi did, she's interested, but she has a lot going on too. So
You were alone your whole life?
no, I actually grew up in Concord.
Okay.
And then got married about 25 years ago. We had a house in Pennacook. Then we moved to Ware, then back to Concord in an apartment, and then to Loudon.
Did I know you were in Pennacook? Whereabouts?
Right across from BD Electric. You know where they have the new
it's like
condos
it's in
now?
a vacant building now. The BD Electric,
Yeah,
I think.
yeah.
That was like for sale a couple years ago.
But right across from there, it's like the last house before that new complex that's in there.
Okay. Yeah.
Pearly Street, South End. Did you really? Well, my parents owned the 3-story brick building right across from Teddy's Teas. Yeah. Very cool. Small world for sure.
That was probably your mom's first New Hampshire house. Yeah.
So, and I mean, that goes back far. And then what else? And
What do you do for a living?
I'm a trainer.
Okay. How many years have you been there?
It'll be 25 in June. Great. I love talking to clients who really want to learn and have a conversation. That's probably about 1%. People just want to tell you what's the best performing fund, what's going to do well in the next year. It's like, yeah, if I knew that, I wouldn't be talking to you.
Because you did the phone stuff when you first started.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I was on the phones probably for the first close to 3 years.
That was so much different. Like people calling saying, like giving you like ticker symbols to place orders for back then. Or did Fidelity have like a website to do all that on?
No, there wasn't.
None of that.
Kind of dating myself here, but no website. They would call in, but the ISC role, they had investments, which was the sales side, which I was a part of, and then service. So if somebody wanted to make a trade, go to service. But I would talk to either people bringing in money to the organization, or if they wanted to invest the money. Like talk about different strategies to do that.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I feel like most of mine, but being online and being so easily done by yourself, most people are just either old people calling for password resets or like the basic routine. Like every month they call in at the same time to get a monthly disbursement. That's pretty much all that it was.
I think so. Your problem though too is you're kind of like me. You don't really know what you really want to do either. So and you have like
I
you
thought
in a
that was-
place, and then you're like, you almost get bored of it, so you jump into the next thing. Seems like Josiah's kind of the same.
I think what I had envisioned in my head was much different than what panned out to be. And I thought that was it. I was like, oh, this is like God put this on my plate. It worked out so well, and then it's like, this is not what I had envisioned. So therefore, it was a big letdown because I had built it up in my own head to be much better than what I thought.
But you gotta pay your dues, dude.
Yeah, paying your dues. That's an old concept.
It's still a thing.
I'm gonna be there for 20 years. Like
Nobody pays dues for 20 years. But
if you don't get respect after a few years, no, it's
you were there for what,
that,
6
that
months?
That makes a career or a job or a company
Yeah.
value longevity more than performance. Be the best performer, but someone's been there for a year longer than you. Well, they get priority everything. It's like, yeah, but they don't work anywhere near as hard, do anywhere near as well.
Yeah, but you don't have the experience they have.
Doesn't matter. If my performance shouldn't matter based on shouldn't go head to head with experience. If it should be performance and performance only.
But just like he said before we started recording, like his wisdom wasn't there yet. So,
but there's like things in like as far as life goes, there's things you still do. Like if I'm a construction worker, if I can frame better than that next person, they shouldn't be making more money or have priority anything if they're not as good of a framer.
I think that's a little different. I don't know. I look at it as a different avenue because blue collar jobs are kind of like different in that way. But
How many years ago was it? 3?
It's been 2.5 now.
Okay.
Because my Series 7 lapsed in November.
Oh,
So it's been at least 2.
okay.
So yeah, I did 2 3/4.
you also volunteer at CareNet, though, right, Joey?
Client advocate at CareNet, Care Women's Center. Yep. Meet with guys who want to be either a better father or learn to be a father. They have some curriculum that we go through. It's really good. A lot of good support there.
What I've heard, it seems like a pretty good place to work, be a part of.
Yeah, for sure.
How'd you get into that?
The executive director, Kelly Lundholm, came and did a presentation at our church. She said one of the biggest needs that they have is with men who would volunteer to help mentor other men. And God just convicted my heart on that. So, and I think, our history of my wife used to be a social worker, adopting, just have God's just given us a heart for those things.
Just found out that when Eliza was over like a couple weeks ago, she got some like Albanian in her like genetics.
Yeah.
So my brother Paul is from Albania.
Oh, okay.
That's where mom and dad like picked him up, for lack of a better term.
That's where my mom's mom is from. Like, my aunt would only speak Albanian. Like, I couldn't have a conversation with her, and that was probably a while ago, a few decades ago. But she only spoke Albanian.
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy. It's like,
What
how
do
does
they
that
call that?
happen?
Chypriot? That's neat. Wow, that's it's like such a small little country, and then it was, I don't know if it still is, but it was the poorest country in Europe at the time when we went over. But
How long ago was that?
2006, 27 years ago.
Wow. So 1998?
Well, actually, right after Ken's birthday, March of 1999.
9. But just 5.
What's your birthday? March what?
21st.
Actually, it was sort of during the Kosovo crisis,
Oh,
because the U.S. Embassy in
yeah.
Toronto was closed. And so we actually had to go to Athens, Greece, the embassy in Athens, to finalize once we finished the required time staying in the country. And then,
We was told that we were the last way out of there, too. It was right after that the embassy in Athens got attacked.
riots, there were riots out front. Yeah, we had just been there. That's right. Forgot about that.
If you're willing to share, what was the impetus for you to adopt?
I was sort of kind of taking care of,
question. Why?
we were overseeing missions in the church at the time. And one of our missionaries was in Albania, but we were in school with a classmate of ours whose grandparents were missionaries in Albania in the 40s and 50s, maybe, and before they closed the doors, and had to leave. So
Got due to communism.
he wrote a book, Edwin Jakes.
I know that. Yeah, I've heard that.
Edwin, and what was his wife's name? I forget. Mrs. Jakes. Yeah, I can't think of her name right now. So they had a granddaughter who was a classmate of ours. And not that played into it at all, and then they lived over at Chestnut Pond right here in Epps for a while in their retirement years before they passed on. And then we knew their daughter and husband, who were the parents of, and they were at our church for a while. And then I was involved in missions. And then we had a missionary couple who was involved in orphanage work in Albania once the doors opened back up. And I had reached out, his name was Mark, I reached out to Mark to see about him coming for a missions conference. And in the process, we had received a prayer letter that said that there was a deaf girl, Shega, who was in need of adoption. And I can't remember how old she was at the time. And so Cindy her mom is deaf in one ear and pretty much deaf in the other. So they had been doing some sign language classes together. So it was like, she's deaf. Maybe this is something God would want us to consider. So we talked and prayed about it, and then we decided let's follow up on it. We reached back out. She had already been, because the mail coming out of Albania at the time was so erratic. By the time we received it, someone else in, was it Oregon? Had already started the process, apparently.
Oh, wow.
So that was like, okay, that's fine. Lord closed that door, no problem at all. So we kind of moved on. But I called Mark about this missions conference. And he said, near the end of the conversation on the phone, he said, hey, by the way, you had reached out to us about adopting this little girl. Would you consider adopting a little boy? Because we already had 3 sons. But it was like, well, how can we say no? We need to at least ask the Lord, kind of a thing. And he said, well, he's all boy and he's clever, but he's in need of adoption. He was 3 years old at the time. And so we started the process. We got in touch with Bethany Christian Services.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then we had a home study, went through all that for however many periods of months. And it was about, a year later before we
delayed because
like Kosovo stuff.
The civil war that was going on in the area. It got delayed 9 months. We were supposed to go in, and we didn't end up going to the end of February.
Yeah. So we finally did adopt him, and we're able to. But yeah, it's become obviously a story that God has had for us, and it's still in process. Yeah. It's kind of like any child. Every single one of our boys' unique personalities are all different, same parents, and yet each one of our sons is completely different. And yeah, it really has and continues to cause us to just trust what God says and continue to really not always have immediate solutions or answers, but we don't have anything else to turn to except Him and His Word. And I think I shared one other time. It was a one time that I got to a point where I said, Lord, I don't know what to do. I know your word. I've read it, studied it. I'm at a point in this that I don't know what else to do. And so I talked to a godly man that I respected, and he said, God hasn't called us to success, but faithfulness. And it's what I needed. I couldn't see what the next step was. And the next step was just keep stepping. And so we've always
spank.
but we've always had a good relationship. And
Oh, you guys want to see him, huh? Right?
yeah, we just
Go on.
I don't know how much we can share here, but we had a chance to get together with him this past week. And it's just neat to see how, in spite of everything that's gone on now, I think he's 30 years old now, God is still working in his life, And I think if he could have ended up in any other family, what would his life have looked like? And I know how far we got pushed. Never would have dreamed of the struggles that we faced, but God's ways are always best. So it's just neat to see, even the conversation that we just had this past week with him. It's good.
Something you said earlier, though, you said, how could you say no? Well, we often can say no, and a lot of people do say no. So good for you for your faith.
Does Kierkegaard do stuff with adoptions?
No.
No.
Oh, well, actually, I should say, I'm sorry. Yes, they do. They talk about adoption as an option. I apologize. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they do.
They're not part of finding families to adopt.
I don't think they're proactively, but if somebody comes in who's pregnant, not sure what to do, they counsel them. One of the options is adoption.
And I think we've, because of our experience, we know there's what you want to, I'm going to say, quote unquote, advertise about adoption to try to encourage people to adopt is, you want to show them the really positives of it. And yet the reality of it is, it's just like being a regular parent with your own biological child. You don't know what that child is going to be like. You don't know what you're going to face. Maybe it'll have some physical issues. You just don't know. And I don't think adoption is any different, but I think sometimes I think we are a little more sensitive to not overselling it in not a, we want to be upfront. We want to be full disclosure about the path that folks might be taking and make sure that they're fully prepared. And I do think the adoption agencies really try hard to do that. But for couples, it's nearly impossible to be able to envision what it could be like, what awaits. I had no idea. This has, like I said, stretched me to levels that I never would have imagined. And I kind of wish I could share them here now, but I almost want to wait until Paul has a chance to, I don't know, be a part of it.
Pause it.
Be a,
share it now.
What's that?
I can pause this.
It's up to you. It's up to you.
But the cool, what you just said was kind of cool. Like, who else could have handled Paul as well as you guys did? It's like, because you guys were good, godly parents, you were given a very difficult situation that, or God gave you that difficult situation that I'm trying to picture Paul going to any other family.
Yeah, I
How
wonder.
much harder would it have been?
It's almost like, can we wait for God to finish what he's doing and for his glory and his renown to be the most magnified?
Like, who else could have?
How, to what extent can God trust us in a sense, with his strength of, are we trusting him? And I don't want to go through suffering. I don't want persecution. I don't want pain. I want the positives, but the reality of it is, when you really, I think, read what God has said, life is full of ups and downs constantly. And I know we want to promote the aspects of the positive side of it. And there is peace and an inner joy that you cannot explain in the midst of being distraught, tearful, grieving, at a loss. But you know you're not alone. You know God is with you, and you know he has a reason, as hard as it is, and he's there, and you can go to him.
So I went to your church when you spoke.
Yeah.
In Loudon, because you're an elder at the Loudon Church. You're our first non-Epsom guest. Why is Job your favorite book?
One of the first, it was kind of a funny story when I got saved in college and went to the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and they were saying, hey, turn to the book of Job. And I looked through the Bible. I'm like, my buddy Kurt was right there. I go, where's Job? I only see the book of Job. Yeah. Jobe. Well, that's how I thought it would look. So I think a few reasons why Job is my favorite book. Number one is the perseverance that he showed. Also in chapter 1, you see the spiritual battle out there that Ephesians 6 talks about. I don't understand it, but it is out there, and we have an enemy that is looking to steal, kill, and destroy. And I always find it fascinating. What does God do with his hand, or what does he allow? I will never understand it, but it's just that aspect is fascinating. Also, I think the definition of success, anybody would have said Job was a success. And I think there's one of my hot button issues is, how does the world define success versus how does the Bible define success? And so often we see Christians or Jesus followers define success the way the world does. And I think Job in chapter 1, where he made these sacrifices for his kids, just in case they sinned, he had the right perspective. So that was really encouraging to me. And then finally, at the end of chapter 1, you see where, he loses everything, and he falls down, he mourns, but he says, the Lord gives, the Lord takes away. May his name be praised. And I don't do that with some basic things in my life, easy things, compared to what Job went through. So that's kind of, for me, the gold standard of Christian living. And I also hear a lot of negative things about his friends, and his friends weren't always that great, but I don't often hear people talk about how his friends were there.
They still sat with him for
Exactly.
7 days without saying a word.
But they were there. And, so I think, yeah, that's
You can
fascinating.
put them on the list of people who get a bad rap in the Bible. Like Lot. He always gets a bad rap. Like Sunday school. Oh, Lot just chose to get the good one. Abraham said, pick your side of the land.
Mm,
And then Lot's one of the righteous who were amongst the people who saw him.
that's right. Well, and also then I think for Job, that's the first part of the book. That means a lot to me. Then you get to chapters 38 to 40, where Job questions God. And then God responds, where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? And after a little while, Job goes, yeah, I got it. And God says, no, you are going to be quiet and you're going to continue to listen. And that's just a reminder for me, some of the things we were just talking about that aren't recorded, that we're just not going to understand. Understand, like, why did we do the things that we've done? But often I find that's also a reflection on me, that one of my idols is I want comfort. That gets shattered pretty quickly. So
That's me too, though. I'm comfort is the problem. Where does Job line up in like the chronological order of Scripture.
Supposedly it was the first one written from what I've read. Yeah.
But like, where does it take place in the timeline? Like post-flood?
Pre-flood, I think.
I've heard pre-flood, but I don't.
Oh.
I don't.
Oh, I'm just curious about
Question. Right off the top of my head, I don't know. Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah.
Chronological
I
Bible.
don't think he's on any of like the genealogy lists of like from what I've seen.
Going back to what you mentioned about Job's friends, I think I have thought in a similar way. This last time that I read Job, though, I was telling Mom this actually. Beside each of the statements that they made, I tried to understand what were they really saying and putting it in very simplistic terms. Like, what would I say today? What would be a similar? And so the accusations that they made against Job, I made little notes over on the side of my Bible. And the more I did that, the more I came away with, boy, they were really awful. To think about what Job was going through, how righteous he was, it kind of changed my perspective, because like, why is God so hard on them? They're such great guys. I mean, they're whatever. And then trying to figure out, was it Elihu there at the end there, trying to figure out him, and why doesn't he seem to ever get like negative? And I wondered, it crossed my mind, I was like, is that maybe Jesus possibly there? Probably not. But it doesn't seem like Elihu ever gets criticized. The other three do. And then Job comes in to play. So I tend to not look at the things that his three friends said, because their conclusions seem to be so unjustified and really accurate. I'm very careful about using those scriptures as being like, boy, take that to the bank. But when I get to Elihu, I'm more looking at it saying, boy, God didn't really come after him. He doesn't show up there in the list at the end. I don't know, just something new for me this last time that I went through Job.
We've been on this like topic of the spiritual realm, angels, demons, Satan. Those are our last like 2 episodes essentially. So in the first part of Job and the start of the second chapter as well, you see Satan amongst like the divine council of God. Seems to have
Sons of God.
interesting access to the heavenly realm as well, even though he's been, essentially cast out. Whether it's free his own choosing or when he's called, then he has access. Have you studied that at all? Thought about that at all? Like God's like council of angels and Satan's, is he a part of said council, or is he just asked that one time? Those 2 times.
Also funny.
Have you had thoughts on that?
No, I haven't studied that at all. I think what's fascinating to me about that is remembering that Satan needed permission to do whatever he did to Job. So for whatever reason, God allowed Satan to do that. It's not like Satan could just go and do that.
Right.
He needed God's permission up to a certain point. Now, he went right up to that point, but he had to have God's permission to do that.
Yeah, he was limited. That was huge.
Yeah.
I bring up all the time after reading that. It's like, it's crazy how he betrayed God, like kind of almost with the first sin of Adam and Eve, but God still entertains him. It's baffling. Like I can't wrap my mind around it of why, but we had this talks all the time about like the spiritual. Interesting, because like there's more to this world than you actually know, and what we should be caring about in the world. There's a whole nother side to it.
Yeah. I was just at Sunday school yesterday talking to one of the guys who's done a little bit of research on the sons of God from Job, because we had a conversation after that message. And we were just talking about Ephesians 6 and just how often, and for me, I use the example of, we have an enemy who's looking to steal, kill, and destroy, looking to devour us like a roaring lion. But often I don't go through my day with that perspective. Yeah. I don't put on that armor every single morning, know that this is going to be a battle. My enemy is looking to do all these things, not only to me, to my family, but God's work in my life.
Yeah, and we were saying last time about him being a liar, father of lies, deceiver. He can appear as an angel of light, potentially, and so his minions will be the same, but there is no truth in him, none. So no matter what he does, there's always a deception there of some sort. And so it kind of fits right in with, I think, realizing that all about that enemy that is out there, and yet the, I guess, assurance to know that, like you said, he's limited. You can only do what God allows and no more. And I can only get to that point when you have martyrs who, Hebrews 11, all these ones who did all these mighty feats because of their faith in the one true God. And some were sawn asunder and lived in caves of the earth and all this, because of their faith. And the world is not worthy. And I'm like, Lord, I know there's no way that I would make it through those experiences unless you help me. Please, if you ever take me through that, help me to do it in a way that honors you. Because I know, I will not do it.
Right.
It would be impossible.
Well, I've also found, based on what we are talking about earlier, that the lowest points in my life in those situations, it's also when I've had some of the most peace that I've ever had, because knowing you're doing what God wants you to do, and he would just give you that peace, or for me, and it's incredible.
Yeah, and
I don't want to go through that though to get his peace.
Right, that's right.
That's my motive. Or give me the peace without any challenges.
Yeah. And I remember too, sometimes every time I would need to discipline my sons, thinking back, first take the log out of your own eye. Lord, is there something in my life? What about me? And there were times I remember where I remember saying to, one of my boys, we understand this situation, whatnot, but in this particular situation, this particular discipline won't be administered. I just feel that there have been times where God has been merciful and kind to me, in spite of me at times. And I feel that this is a time that I'd like to, do that as well. But it was like every time I had to do self-evaluation for in my own life before I ever went through with whatever discipline I had to administer.
Have you and Cindy ever taught a parenting class? I think you'd be great at it. Great at it.
Oh, really? I mean, we had our second son. He had a couple of folks that he knew came to our house one time, and we met for a while. I think you get to a point where you either believe what God says or you don't. And if you don't, there's no more further steps that really can be taken. You're almost like you're at an impasse. You just sort of, you end. It's like, I know what you're saying. I see what you're saying and what God's word says. I see the verses, I see the scriptures, but I've heard this in my college classes or my social work or my thus and so, my whoever. And it's some human person who's done their research and all this stuff. And I just always come back to, so if the answers are out there and we as humans have those answers, then why isn't everything fixed? And I think it does come to our faith. Do we believe what God says or don't we? And if we do, then I go to his word and I say, okay, Lord, what do I do? And I know and I literally came to a point in my life where I knew that doing what God said could potentially cost me everything. And I remember praying and saying, Lord, if that's the case, then I understand, but I hope that can end up being the case, But I remember being also concerned about my sons and their children and in the culture and the environment in the world and the governmental system and all that is there, where we're getting to a point right now where those freedoms are almost being taken away. I think it's called, it can be viewed as being, cultural education, improvement, knowledge. We're growing. We know so much more. I think we're kidding ourselves, honestly, but we want to convince ourselves of that. But the reality of it is God is the only one that really knows what the best thing to do in any given situation really is. And we have to trust him on that. I think that's one of the things that made it really difficult for us as parents all those years, and why it's so encouraging now to be able to have relationships and conversations that I think would have been totally different if we hadn't have done it God's way.
Yeah.
I couldn't see any light at the end of the tunnel at the time.
I think people would walk out of your parenting class and be too blunt. No, I don't want to do that.
Or you would read a whole chapter out of the Bible.
There's a running joke.
I mean,
My dad can't read a verse. He has to read the whole chapter. If not,
Context? What? Context of scripture? What's wrong with you?
I was like, get that first in Romans. He's like, I should read the whole thing to you guys.
He said, like, verse 5 and 6, he's like, not going to read the whole thing.
We're going to go back every chapter. It's great.
But to his credit, that's the whole reason I study scripture the way I am, because he was one of the first inspiration people in my life. And like, I don't know how not to read it that way now. So we give him a hard time for it, but I think it's the way to do it.
That's why it's so important to develop these good habits, especially when we're young. In the Lord. In the Lord. In the Lord. In the Lord.
We kind of had this conversation before. It's like we parented our kids, I think, each individually. It wasn't like this blanket umbrella, one size fits all. So we tried to tailor it to each of them. You know, it varied.
And I think that's wisdom.
I think didn't you sort of indicate that maybe when we chatted?
You were the perfect one. So
Yeah. I definitely had way more freedoms than Jazz and Josiah ever did.
You are
Was that
so more sensitive.
yeah, was that an effect of
Being corrected that you done wrong. You were
And no, so not
all in tears with a verbal correction. Not that he only got verbal correction, but he was sorry to have disappointed or have
violated a trust maybe or
Violated.
something, but
and so he was easier to guide that way.
Yeah.
That's what to say. I didn't need
We have a child like that as well. So who's very sensitive to that verbal correction and has that heart.
yeah.
Very.
Have you guys planned it that way? I don't know, probably not. But it may have just been an effect of
no.
Josiah being different than Jazz, being different than Josiah.
Yeah, like our oldest is not one to communicate as much as the second was more apt to want to talk things through. And then Kent, I think you came and you were like you had two older brothers and you had your own personality. And then all of a sudden when I guess came along, that really I think brought a whole different dynamic to the whole family mix.
And Laura says like she's gonna pry things out of me though. So he decides the open communicator.
Mhm.
I will be, but it needs to be like pried out of me. And Laura says that too.
But yeah, Cody, you talk with Kent all the time, right?
Yeah, sometimes. Sometimes he falls asleep, but he communicates well and like gives advice when I come and ask, and so it's not like he's opposed to it. It's just not. I wouldn't say it's prying. You got to be upfront with him. You can't just be expecting him to say it. You got to kind of confront him with it, or bring something to his attention.
I have the details.
Yes.
You went to basketball game. How was it?
You should have been there more.
When you're with your family, do the kids ever say, "Oh, I was Dad's favorite or Mom's favorite"? No, I was
Mom's favorite.
yeah.
And she would openly say that too.
We have fun with it.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So much about relationship, depending, I think how we discipline our kids is going to look different for each of the kids. What's really important for me is my kids knowing that I love them.
Yeah.
But even that, and God loves them.
Yeah.
We may be going through a difficult time, but I still love you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember sharing that I remember my dad always really made it a point to reaffirm his love for us. And that really impacted me a lot because I think it meant so much to me that I wanted to make sure that I did that with my sons.
Were your parents believers?
Yes. Yeah. They were young when they had me, and possibly had come to know the Lord when they were younger, but really both came broken homes and things like that. So they really didn't start growing probably until their 20s. But so for me, I kind of look at it as being I pretty much grew up in a Christian home. As I look back at it now, I can, see a little bit from a child's eyes when I was young, some memories of the things now. I remember, oh yeah, they must have been really growing through certain things, and that was hard for me. I never wanted to violate their trust. I always had a good relationship with them for whatever reason. And then with our first son, he was ready to go. Spread his wings, 18 years old, be his own man and go. And he did.
Sounds like one of mine.
Yeah. And it was like, it was just a different personality,
Mom and I were talking a little bit ago. Can you shed some light on, since you grew up in the Catholic Church or in it a little bit longer, what exactly does Catholicism believe? Is it a true sect of Christianity? 'Cause in my head, in my Sunday school mind, I'd always pictured Catholicism praying to Mary, doing a lot of these, all these work things. You got to pray the rosary, you got to give your money, you got to buy people out of purgatory.
Go to confession.
You got to do all these things. That's kind of what I had in my head. And I recently went through called the Gospel series. Jordan Peterson put it on through the Daily Wire media platform, and they had a bishop on. I think it's a church in Minnesota, I think, but a bishop was part of the panel. So they had that guy's perspective as well, and he was one of the ones in that panel of 9 guys that I respected one of the most, as he had some of the best points and perspectives as they went through the Gospels together and analyzed them. So kind of changed my mind on that a little bit, but I don't know anything about Catholicism at all. Is it a true sect of Christianity or are they mistaken?
Yeah, so I can just share.
I was just saying, I think it depends on the church of Catholicism you go to. I think there is some good Catholicism out there, but each church, I think, is different.
Yeah, I think it's dependent on the church you go to. My experience, I don't ever remember hearing about Jesus and our need for salvation. It was just doing the works, and the works was the rosary, was giving, was going to confession. And that was actually one of the biggest things for me. I never understood, if God forgave my sins, why do I need to go to the priest? That never made sense. So I think some Catholic churches, the church certainly that I went to, it was all about works.
So Jesus wasn't a part of it at all.
I don't remember hearing about Jesus. We would have small readings from the book of Mark, book of Luke, but that was really about it. It was just, you are a Christian because you go to church you do these things.
What was a church service or a mass? What did it entail? Today you have music and then you have a sermon. What was a Catholic mass?
There would be an organ playing and some singing, but the congregation wouldn't sing. It was just, you had either a chorus or you had 1 or 2 singers who did it all. And even now today, in the last month, I've gone to 2 funerals. They've been both in a Catholic church, and I could recite most of what was happening just because it's the same thing over and over. And I think that's what was also really hard for me. It was just, there was no emotion in it. It was just, this is what you do.
Yeah, it's that gentleman on that guest panel was, again, Bishop Barron. I think it was one of the best on the panel as far as from a true Christian perspective. So there's got to be different, even sects of Catholicism than just what I have, the elementary picture in my head.
Yeah, my experience is that most Catholics that I've come across, some of them have certainly been Jesus followers, and to me, according to the Bible, I'll see them in heaven.
Yeah.
Most of them not. So getting back, there was a lot of reciting of...
A lot of incense, too, in church.
A lot of incense, yeah. Reciting of phrases, responses from the congregation, but it's already laid out for you. It's not from the heart. It's what the Catholic Church has dictated is how I'm going to respond to this.
The only thing I learned about Jesus, like he stated, Dennis, was just his death and burial and resurrection. Other than that, we never learned anything else really about him. It was all Old Testament work and whatever we never were told to read our Bible. We only learned what they wanted to give to us.
And I would love to have a conversation with a Catholic priest. Maybe this will...
I would too. I think it'd be awesome.
Yeah, and for me, one of the things of the Catholic Church is, you see when they have a cross, a crucifix, Jesus is always on there. Why do they do that? because it's accurate. It's historically accurate, but that's not the end of the story, and that's not. Yeah, there are just a lot of things I just didn't understand, and I don't think it was encouraged to ask questions. As you're in line, you do this, and this is the way that it is. I would say the exception is I could have some conversations with Father Wall, but that was decades ago, and I don't remember the content. I just remember he would just talk about things. He was from Alabama, and he wore this shirt that I'll never forget. It said, "If you lead a good life, say your prayers, and go to church. When you die, you'll go to Alabama." I hope not, but that's what he had.
He was Alabama lakes are actually some beautiful areas.
I've never been there.
You said you maybe have one question before we wrap up.
Yeah, I was more. This is not so much necessarily, about you per se, but so if you had grandchildren who grow up in a secular environment, and they're going to the local public schools or whatever, and they say Grammy and Grandpa, or Grumpy and Nana in our case, or whatever, they say, I'm not so sure I believe in God and all that. I kind of, I've heard about, evolution and all that. And we go back, and I don't know that we can know. And what steps would you take to be God's representative to your own grandchildren in situations like that? Because I've been trying to think it through personally. So,
How many grandchildren do you have?
6.
Oh, wow. I only have one. I think the first thing for me would be to remember that it is this grandchild's journey. And I would have to probably hold myself back from trying to convert them right then and there.
Yes.
But consistently speaking truth into them and loving them no matter what. When I would spend time with them, I would bring up what's going on. I'd invite them to church as long as, their parents would be okay with that, because ultimately, the grandparent, not the parent. But just consistently speak truth and love into them and let God do his work, which is so hard when it comes to kids and grandkids.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll have
you need to shut that off so we need to talk to him about Cody.
Yeah,
So
that's a
yeah.